we're going to talk today a little bit about the Bristol Myers Squibb program and the foundation. And one of the biggest things that I'm really interested in is really just to start off with, how'd you get into medicine to begin?
So my path to medicine was a little bit circuitous. So I initially started my academic work as an English major. I studied literature and stuff like that with this kind of idea in the back of my head. I wanted to do medicine, but didn't have a real plan of how to do that. And then I finished my undergraduate training and didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I actually ended up working in clinical research, and I fell in love with clinical research. So they really kind of wedded my love of like stories and kind of taking individual stories and kind of finding the essential truth of those stories and weaving them together into some sort of larger truth that may apply to a whole population. So it kind of let me find a way with that kind of English major mindset to kind of make medicine into a story that could be used to help multiple people. And that kind of found my way back to medicine that way, particularly the care of people with HIV. That's how I got back into medicine.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, explain to me a little bit about, a little bit more about the HIV cancers, that sort of link.
Well, I got into the care of people with HIV because I was really drawn to the kind of complexity of their care, not just the medical complexity, but the social complexity, the political complexity, that all patients with that illness had all those kind of things going on or were in them surrounding their care. And that kind of really attracted me because of all those multiple things interacting with people with that doctor-patient relationship. And then as part of that, I always kind of looked at medicine through a primary care lens. I really wanted to take care of people, become a part of their lives, kind of take care of them over a long period of time. And as I got into HIV primary care, I learned more and more about the toll of anal cancer among people with HIV. This is really a thing that was affecting all people with HIV, regardless of their whatever the kind of life they were living, regardless of their exposures in the past. There's a much higher rate of anal cancer among people with HIV, and it was so common that it was something that really needed to be addressed in primary care. And so that really kind of made the light go off in my head because I loved research. I also loved primary care. And this kind of wedded all the things I was interested in medicine all together in one thing. We're caring for people with HIV, doing so in a primary care setting, and trying to do preventive medicine and keep people living longer.
I'm glad you said that. And it's interesting for me how you sort of weave that sort of complexity of the people, right, in the communities and the various issues that are actually happening within them and bringing them closer to actually having the therapies that would actually be able to impact their lives favorably. I was thinking about, how the treatment has changed for anal cancers recently as we start thinking about the new blockbuster study that kind of came out with the, as you know, the new immune cancer initiated or, immunotherapies that we actually have, and showing that, in some types of, with certain mutations and things like that, or rectal cancers, you may not even need surgery anymore. Can you comment on the evolution from when you started to in your treatment right now of how you think anal cancers are being treated before, now, but what's your hope in the future when it comes to anal cancers?
Well, I think my big hope is, as there's been great innovations in treatment for anal cancers, but I think that ideally what I'm focusing on is prevention. So I think like an ounce of prevention is going to be worth a pound of cure. While there've been great strides in treatment modalities, having less invasive treatments with better outcomes, still I would rather prevent that cancer from happening in the first place if I could. And that's really the goal of my research right now. So what we've kind of had some strides in anal cancer screening throughout my career, because it's really kind of there's a lot of new innovation happening in that field. So since I've kind of entered into this world of research, we are working to kind of perfect our ways of screening for anal precancers, so we can then remove those anal precancers before they become anal cancer. And that approach has been validated recently in the Anchor trial, which is a large multi-site trial, which showed that removing precancers actually has been shown to effectively prevent anal cancer from developing. So that's great, that's wonderful. That tells us we have a way of preventing these cancers from happening before we have to worry about treatment outcomes. But the thing is, we have to find those precancers before we can treat them. And that is what my research is looking at. So there's new ways to find those anal precancers.
So as you start thinking about how to find them, it actually, it depends on two things, right? The technology and the ability to sort of find them, but it also depends on the community and their trust for them to be participants. So how are you addressing that issue?
Absolutely. I mean, we can have the most amazing technology in the world. If people don't trust you enough to come to your clinic to receive that technology, it's pointless. And I think that particularly the populations that have a heavier burden of anal cancer, there's a lot of very justified systemic distrust in those communities of the medical establishment. There are higher rates of anal cancer among people with HIV, higher rates of anal cancer and poor anal cancer outcomes among Black populations as well. Both these communities have a lot of well-earned medical distrust, and that needs to be actively overcome by the people providing care, or else no matter how good the technology is, no one's going to be there to receive it. And so I think there are many ways we can address this. I think first of all, just who is doing this research? I think we need to have more diverse research professionals, not just physicians, but research assistants, aides, nurses. All these people need to be members of the community they're caring for, because I think that does a lot of things. First of all, it gives you a common language to speak to your patients about. Yes, you can try to connect with people who come from different backgrounds than you do, but if you have that common experience, that's really just a quick entry into a shared language of that person, a shared experience. I think that really is hard to duplicate other ways. I think it also lets you bring the concerns of that community into the planning room, into the research protocol development room. It lets you think about, well, what do these people care about? And can we represent those cares when we design this trial, when we recruit for this trial, when we think about how the trial is going to be set up? And I think that there's some things that are just really hard to know by reading a paper. You have to really live that life. And we need to have people with those experiences in those rooms when we develop these trials. And so I think diversity of the workforce is also going to be really, really important.
And that's hot. So as you start thinking about that in the context of diversity of the workforce, impact in the community, when I think about clinical trials, I think of clinical design and implementation. But up until recently, there hasn't really been an emphasis on the attention that's needed about the outreach and engagement for the community. It's about even entertaining the social determinants of health. So can you tell me how that's evolved for you? And an example is, I know you're part of the Robert Winn Scholars thing. I mean, can you sort of talk about that a little bit more about where you think trials are, but where you think ultimately trials can go?
Absolutely.
And the importance of the development of those trials.
So I've been fortunate enough to be one of the first recipients of the Robert Winn Diversity in Clinical Trials.
But I'd argue I would be actually honored, and I'm actually benefiting from your actually getting out there and doing it. But
So good luck on both sides. But I'm part of the initial cohort, and I think that this program really kind of does two really, really important things I think for the success of these kind of studies. Firstly, I think from the investigator perspective, so like from me being a young investigator trying to learn the ropes of this world, I think a lot of those things that are needed to know to be a successful researcher, like how to develop a research trial, how to form a research question, how to write a manuscript appropriately, a lot of those things are not necessarily taught in classrooms. They're kind of a shadow curriculum that you kind of have to learn from the people around you. And people from diverse backgrounds may not have access to those shadow curriculums and those networks. So I think creating an infrastructure to get that information to people who may, depending on their environment or their connections, may not have access to that is going to be really important for getting them entree into the places they'll need to do really important research. So I think that's really important. And then secondly, I think that the focus on actual tangible skills and thinking about it critically of how to engage diverse communities, how to build medical trust, how to move clinical trials into non-traditional settings to try to meet patients where they are. But think about that critically, and not just have that be a line somewhere on a slide that's just going to breeze over, but actually be something worthy of discussion and focus, is a really important skill to do research on people who are often excluded from research, because research structures are not built to cater to them. And so learning how to leverage those resources you might get as a junior researcher to engage these communities who often are overlooked, I think is going to be really important for getting more people involved in the research on both sides, both as the patient as well as the investigator.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that brings up a really good point, a follow-up question for me. In the context, you said something that really resonated, right? It is building trust. And so as you're thinking about that and the importance of that, of various communities, African-American communities, right? Latino communities, LGBTQ communities, there with the health system have been, I wouldn't say so much distrust, in some cases, yes, in some cases mistrust, but certainly low trust. So how can you and your project what element of that are you trying to figure out how we can, as you, as an individual, help to build more trust, but then actually transition that into, if this program were to work and everything hits, how can our institutions become more trustworthy?
So I think, if I had the answer to this question, I would be, on a world tour. But I think I have some ideas of how to work towards this. I think kind of the first step is just showing up and being present. And being present not just when it's helpful to you, but being present consistently. And I think that in the world of research where funding may be temporary and things like that, that can be really tough to accomplish. And I think having and I think that's one thing that the Winn program is addressing, is that having it be a continuous stream of researchers from these communities, interested in these communities, being present in these communities, I think can create a continuous research presence in these communities that will then be a step towards proving that you're not just there to exploit that community for a particular research question and then taking your data and going. That you're there to actually invest into long-term solution building for these communities. And I think and not just be one person's random research question, but to have it be a structured thing where there's going to be continued investment, continued presence, multiple research questions, like kind of building an infrastructure for research in these communities. I think is going to be a step towards building that trust, because it takes generations to build trust, and you can't just do it in one afternoon. And having a commitment from institutions to make that investment, I think, is going to be really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Changing gears just a little bit is, this is in the history of during the Black History Month. If you could pick out an historical figure, if you would, that actually continues to inspire you to this day, who would that be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. Wow. I've really.
You only get one, and you'll get one.
I think history is such a tough thing, because in many ways, I think kind of the experience of being a minority in America, you kind of get divorced from your own history. And so it kind of has this kind of disconnect where it doesn't really feel like it's your own. But I would say that I'll pick something a little controversial. So one thing, and this is something I learned about more recently in my life, but I think the proximity to my experiences is actually really important. So I did my residency training in the Bronx here in New York. And as part of that, we learned a lot about the history of the Bronx and the history of healthcare in New York City. And one thing that I had never heard about before doing my training were the Young Lords, who were a group of revolutionary Afro-Latino activists in East Harlem. And you kind of very inspired by the Black Panthers, doing kind of similar sort of revolutionary work. But the things that they were able to accomplish for their community is really inspiring. And I think the thing that I draw from that is, like, I live across the street from where their headquarters used to be, so I walk by it every day. But to think about that, they really came from nothing and were able to by commitment to their community and by being innovative and being dedicated to what they were doing, able to accomplish so much, but starting with so little. And this reminds me, as a junior researcher, I feel like, oh God, I have no funding. I don't have any money to do this thing. It's like, well, it's not, you don't need money. You just have to try. And even trying is more than half the effort. So I think I can take inspiration from them, that they were able to build so much and have such a lasting impact with really so little to start. So, I'm lucky, while I may not have a multi-million-dollar research budget, but certainly I can accomplish something for this community, even if because I'm doing pretty good and I can do something with what I've got. And I find I can draw inspiration from that.
In fact, I think you bring up a good point that sometimes we, when we go back, we don't really fully recognize the impact of some of really the community activators, right? And the community activists. And as you go back in history, in the context of having people from those communities being interested in people within those communities for the good of those communities was something that happened in the 50s and 60s that, again, manifests itself differently today in the context of, for example, folks who are saying, why can't we get health and science closer and more open to our communities? In that context, what is the long-term impact that you're trying to achieve with both the research and after completing this program? So when you say, when will you know that you've been at least somewhat successful, what does success look like for you?
Well, I think success is going to take a lot of many different forms. And I think that participating in this program and doing this research is going to let me kind of engage with success in a few different ways. So firstly, this program is kind of nurturing my research career to try to get me to get those first steps taken to be an established independent researcher to be able to do this, to address these research questions, to let me be the one who designs the questions, let me be the one who decides how those questions will be asked. Because I think that advocacy can be built into research questions if you ask the question correctly. And so I really would like to be a fully formed independent researcher so I can have the ability to form those questions and ask those questions. So I think that's one form of success. And I think that this program has well poised me to be able to do that by letting me get my feet off the ground and start moving in the direction to gather data, get some research accomplished to show that these things are worthwhile and demonstrate that to my colleagues. But secondly, I think part of success is also building a legacy and not just having it as being an island, but having an influence on the next generation and things like that. And I really do. One thing that attracted me to this program was that there was a mentoring aspect of it and being able to work with a medical student. And so I think that has created a network where there'll be 2 or 3 years from now, a new round of researchers who have already gotten their taste for this. They'll then come in to be able to take over these studies, be my junior researcher, be the fellow I work with to work on these next steps. So I think that is also a mark of success, to not just be one person doing something, but the beginning of a community of people doing something. And I think that this is going to be a step towards doing that. It's not, this stuff happens in isolation, but I don't want to just be one researcher out as an island by myself. I want to be part of a community of researchers doing this kind of work. And I think that this is a step towards that. Along with the other people I've met in this program, the network that we've been able to develop, already some great collaboration ideas have come from that. So I think, again, just being part of a community of researchers who care about these issues, focus on these issues, and make these a fundamental part of the research questions that we ask.
I love that. So, that's, really, I think a fantastic response. As I think about this, I think about how it must feel for you to know, we usually talk about pioneers as being someone else. This program is unique in that it's pioneering, bringing together the sort of design implementation and bringing in this awareness of the community. How does it feel to be part of a program in which you're pioneering or trying to blaze new paths?
Well, I would say that actually feels really like it really feels like coming home in many ways. I think this can be that first day we met all the other other people who are part of the program, and just to have other people who really were passionate about the same things that you were passionate about and cared about the things that you cared about, and were upset or energized about the same things that they'd seen in the news or read. And it's like that felt really comfortable. Like it felt like you found your people. And so while this is pioneering, it also felt really comfortable. Like it felt right. And so it's been surprisingly easy to be able to do this. It's been great to find those other researchers out there in a similar kind of working the same world, but having that other interest in advocacy and equity and stuff like that has felt really, really like comforting and great. So it's been really easy to be a pioneer in that regard.
Man, I'm gonna come through and give you a Zoom hug, man. So last question. What would you like to tell future applicants of the Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation's Winn Awards program? If you had any advice for them, what would that be?
I would say kind of the biggest advice I would have is to bring your whole self to your research, and not to feel like you have to cut yourself away or cut parts of your personality or parts of your history or parts of your interests that you think are not what a researcher is supposed to be or what research is supposed to look like or kind of questions research is supposed to care about, and try to edit those out of yourself when you present yourself professionally. I think that I would encourage you to bring your whole self, bring all of your experiences, bring your whole history, bring all the things you've experienced, both positive and negative, the questions that you ask, to the applications that you present. Because while we may have been kind of subconsciously told that those things aren't valuable, but they are valuable in certain places. They're valuable here. And I think that this is a place where I would encourage you to bring your whole experience and your whole self to the questions you ask, because they want all of you, not just the paper writing part of you. They want everything. And so I think I would encourage you to just bring your whole self to your application.
I appreciate that. And that's, part of this sort of mission we have, hopefully with the program, to move and pursue always academic excellence, but to actually move towards something in our pursuit of excellence that we actually move towards academic relevance. And it's relevant to us, it's relevant to the communities we serve. So listen, this has been fantastic. And one, I appreciate you just taking the time out to be able to talk with us today and be able to reflect not just on the program, but reflect on really what it is that we're all trying to do, particularly during this particular month of making sure that our communities are impacted not only today, but every day. and I want to take my hat off to you. I think from my perspective, my last question, is there anything else that's on your mind?
I mean, I guess just a happy Black History Month to everyone, and I hope that we can continue moving upward and forward. Yeah, other than that, just sort of keep plugging away every day, no matter how dark things look. Things are getting better slowly. It's got to keep working at it.
Got to keep working at it. Palante, palante.
Exactly.
So listen, appreciate you. Thank you for taking time, and again, keep up the good fight, and keep blazing the trails. And again, great work, and I am so proud and honored to be able to know that I know you, man, as you are starting to do these things through this program. There's you started some good things, and there's some even greater things for you to accomplish, and it will get done. Of that, I'm absolutely confident. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Winn. I appreciate you as well.